You never think the worst about the people who live next to you. You borrow sugar from them. You wave at them in the mornings. You trust them with your spare key when you go out of town. And then one night, something small happens. A sound, a look, a missing object. And suddenly, every memory you have of them rearranges itself into something ugly. Because the most terrifying realization isn't that evil exists. It's that it might be living 10 feet away from you, and it knows you're watching. I'm writing this because I don't know what else to do. I haven't slept properly in days, and every time I close my eyes, I see dirt collapsing inward, slowly, deliberately, like something is finally being covered up the way it always should have been. I keep telling myself I'm overreacting, that there's a reasonable explanation, that grief does strange things to people. But grief doesn't ask to borrow a shovel at dusk. And grief doesn't stare into your house in the middle of the afternoon like it's counting how many witnesses are left. 5 years ago, my next-door neighbor's son disappeared. Charlie, real name Charles, came knocking on our door on a Tuesday evening, his face pale in a way I'd never seen before. He didn't cry. That was the strangest part. He just stood there gripping the porch railing like if he let go, he might collapse. "My son's gone," he said. No build-up, no explanation. Just that. His son, Daniel, was 14 years old. Last seen walking home from school. Backpack missing. Phone turned off. By that night, police cars lined the street, lights flashing silently as officers went door to door. It was on the news within hours. For weeks, our neighborhood felt like it was holding its breath. Flyers went up on telephone poles. Search parties combed nearby woods. Reporters stood across the street pointing cameras at Charlie's house, asking questions nobody could answer. My wife and I did what anyone would do. We brought food. We offered help. We told them we were there if they needed anything. Charlie thanked us every time. Kathy, his wife, barely spoke. As months passed, then years, the searches slowed. The reporters disappeared. The flyers yellowed and fell apart in the rain. Daniel was never found. No body, no suspects. No closure, and the house next door changed. Kathy stopped coming outside altogether. When she did, she moved like a ghost. Eyes hollow, shoulders hunched, always looking down. Charlie, on the other hand, became jittery, too polite, too eager to talk when spoken to, but never initiating conversation himself. He laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. He startled easily. Still, we chalked it up to grief. What else could it be? Last week, everything changed. It was around 6:30 in the evening. I was dragging the garbage cans to the curb when Charlie walked up beside me, so quietly I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Hey, Tim," he said. I turned, heart pounding. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, Charlie, you all right?" Yeah, I'm fine." He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "Listen, I hate to ask, but could I borrow a shovel?" I didn't think twice. "Sure," I said. "I've got a good one in the garage." His shoulders visibly relaxed. "I'd really appreciate it. Just doing some work in the backyard. I'll bring it back tomorrow." I handed it to him. He thanked me, almost too many times, and walked back toward his yard, gripping the handle like it weighed 100 pounds. I went inside. 10 minutes later, I was upstairs putting laundry away when I glanced out the window that overlooked his backyard. Charlie was digging. Not a small hole. Not something you'd dig to plant a tree or fix a sprinkler. This was a deep, wide pit. He was sweating despite the cool evening air, stopping every few minutes to catch his breath. The shovel struck the dirt with a dull, rhythmic thud that carried faintly through the glass. I felt a twinge of guilt watching him struggle. He was 56, after all. I went downstairs, grabbed my second shovel, and headed outside. "Charlie," I called as I stepped into his yard. The reaction was immediate and wrong. He looked up, eyes wide, dropped the shovel I'd lent him, and rushed toward me like I just pulled a gun. No, it's okay," he said quickly, blocking my path. "I've got it. Please, just leave." I laughed nervously. "What's your problem?" "I'm just helping." His face hardened. "I will not allow you to use that shovel in my backyard." The words were sharp, final. Then he pointed toward the gate. Not gesturing, pointing. Like you'd point at an animal that didn't understand language. I didn't argue. I couldn't. Something in his eyes told me this wasn't a conversation, It was a boundary I wasn't meant to cross. I left without another word. From my upstairs window, I watched him dig for another half hour. When he finally stopped, he stood there breathing heavily, hands on his knees. Then he straightened up and did something that made my stomach turn. He looked around, not casually, deliberately, scanning rooftops, windows, shadows, making sure no one was watching. And then his eyes snapped directly to mine. I froze. We locked eyes for maybe 2 seconds, long enough for him to know, without question, that I'd seen everything. I stepped back from the window slowly, forcing myself not to panic. That night, I barely slept. At 1:30 a.m., the sound woke me. Metal hitting dirt. Again and again. I crept to the window, but it was too dark to see anything. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I went outside. I eased along the fence line, heart hammering so loudly I was sure he'd hear it. When I reached the back corner, I peeked over. Charlie was digging again. Same hole, same frantic energy. When he went back inside for a moment, I climbed the fence and approached the pit. Moonlight revealed just enough. At the bottom of the hole, partially buried, was a black garbage bag. Only a corner visible. I stared at it, my mind racing. I looked at the back door, then at the bag, then back at the door. 3 times. I almost reached for it. Almost. Instead, survival instinct kicked in, and I ran back to my yard just as he came outside again. The next morning, the hole was gone, perfectly filled, and Charlie's SUV, normally parked in the driveway, was sitting on the street. He never returned my shovel. And yesterday afternoon, I looked up from my coffee and saw him standing at his window, staring directly into mine. When our eyes met, he shut the blinds. I haven't told my wife. I don't know if I should call the police. All I know is this. Whatever was in that hole is no longer there. Todd aimed a pistol up at me. I know that I've lived in 3 houses in my life. 2 with my family, 1 alone. And even now, decades later, when I wake up in the middle of the night to a sound I can't place, my mind doesn't go to burglars or nightmares. It goes to windows. Because that's where it started. That's where it always started. Someone standing just outside the glass, perfectly still, watching me breathe. I was 15 years old, and we were getting ready to move. Boxes were everywhere. Half our furniture was already gone. The house felt hollow, like it knew we were leaving and was slowly emptying itself before we could. We'd lived there my entire life. 15 years. And in all that time, I couldn't tell you a single meaningful thing about the neighbors. They lived in the house right next to ours, a modest 2-story place with peeling paint and a chain-link fence that always leaned a little too far inward. A man lived there with his 2 sons, Eric and Todd. I knew their names. That was it. No birthday parties together. No shared holidays. No casual hellos over the fence. We existed beside each other like strangers on the same bus, aware but deliberately distant. Looking back, that should have been my first warning. One afternoon, my younger brother and I were playing basketball in the driveway. He was 10 at the time, skinny, loud, still convinced he was invincible. I was lining up a shot when I noticed someone standing at the edge of the driveway. Todd. He hadn't made a sound approaching us. Hey, he said. I nodded. Hey. He stared at us for a moment, then asked, Is it true you guys are moving? The question caught me off guard. Yeah, I said. In a couple months. He nodded slowly, like he was filing the information away. That sucks. There was an awkward silence. Then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, he said, You want to come shoot BB guns with me and my brother tomorrow? By the river. I hesitated. I didn't know this kid. At all. But I was 15, bored, and trying to act older than I felt. Sure, I said. My brother perked up immediately. Can I come? Todd glanced at him, then shrugged. Yeah. And just like that, he turned and walked away. No smile. No goodbye. Just gone. The next day, just before dusk, the doorbell rang. My brother and I exchanged a look and rushed to the door before our parents could ask questions. Todd and Eric stood on the porch. Both were dressed in full camouflage. Pants, jackets, boots. Todd had a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. They looked serious. Uncomfortably serious. The walk to the woods was quiet. Too quiet. They didn't joke. Didn't talk about school. Didn't even ask our names again. Every now and then, my brother would look at me and smirk, clearly holding back laughter at how absurd the whole thing felt. I smiled back, but something in my gut had already tightened. We reached the river just as the sky started to dim. The woods were thick and shadowy, the kind of place where sound doesn't echo, it gets swallowed. Todd dropped the duffel bag onto the ground and unzipped it. Eric snapped a branch off a tree and hurled it into the river with surprising force. I stopped smiling. Todd reached into the bag and handed my brother and me each what looked like a BB gun. Then he said it. "They're real." I laughed reflexively. "Yeah, okay." Eric pulled a handgun from the bag, loaded, and fired it across the river. The sound cracked through the woods like lightning. Birds exploded out of the trees. My brother froze. I felt something cold crawl up my spine. Without saying a word, I took the gun from my brother's hands, placed both of them back into the bag, and zipped it shut. "Nope," I said. "We're leaving." Eric stopped firing. Both of them stared at us. Not surprised. Not confused. Angry. "Whatever," one of them muttered as we turned away. We walked home fast. Neither of us spoke. That night at dinner, we told our parents the boys next door were weird. We didn't mention the guns. I don't know why. I wish I did. I woke up that night to cold air brushing my face. My window was wide open. I sat up, confused, when I felt something hard press against the back of my head. And then a whisper. "SH." I didn't scream. I don't know how. Todd's voice was inches from my ear. "If you ever tell anyone," he whispered, "especially my dad, I'll come back and kill you and your entire family." I swallowed. "Okay," I whispered. He pressed the gun harder against my skull. Then he climbed back out the window. For months after that, I barely slept. Every night, I'd catch either Todd or Eric standing at one of their windows, staring into mine or my brother's room. Sometimes they waved. Sometimes they didn't move at all. A week before we moved, a rock hit my window at 1 a.m. I opened it. They laughed. I heard one of them call me a coward. When we finally moved, I felt like I could breathe again. We never told anyone. And to this day, I still don't know what would have happened if we stayed. At the time I'm writing this, it's been 2 weeks. 2 weeks since I learned how thin the line really is between your home and someone else's nightmare bleeding into it. I've replayed that night so many times that the details no longer feel like memories. They feel like footage, grainy, distorted, impossible to forget. And the worst part? I still live here. I hate my neighborhood. I don't mean that in the dramatic, first apartment sense. I mean in the quiet, resigned way you hate something you know you're stuck with. Fresh out of college. Student loans breathing down my neck. One income. One option. So I bought a small, run-down house in an area everyone warned me about. Bars on some windows. Sirens at night. Houses too close together, like they're leaning in to listen. The neighbors on one side blasted music at all hours. The neighbors on the other side, they were worse. 2 women lived there. One was in her early 60s, thin, sharp-faced, eyes always narrowed like she was permanently suspicious of the world. The other was younger, maybe late 40s or early 50s, and deeply, violently unwell. I don't know what their relationship was. Mother and daughter? Sisters? Caretaker and patient? All I know is what I saw. The younger woman would have episodes. Screaming, rocking back and forth, arms crossed tightly over her chest like she was holding herself together, making noises that didn't sound like words. Sometimes I'd sit on my front porch and catch the older woman gripping her by the shoulders, trying to restrain her while yelling back in desperation. More than once, the younger woman pointed at me, mumbled things. I stopped sitting outside after that. The night it happened, I had work early the next morning. I went to bed around 10:30, but the noise next door wouldn't stop. Screaming, crashing, the older woman yelling, voice cracking like she was barely holding things together. An hour passed, then another. Finally, I snapped. I threw on a hoodie and marched next door, anger overpowering fear. I knocked hard. The door flew open. "What the hell do you want?" the older woman barked. I forced myself to stay calm. "I've got work in the morning. Could you please keep it down?" She stared at me like I'd insulted her ancestors. Then the younger woman appeared behind her. "How dare you?" she screamed. "How dare you?" She tried to rush me. The older woman grabbed her and slammed the door shut in my face. I stood there, heart pounding. Then silence. Complete silence. I went back home uneasy, but relieved, and I slept. I woke up suddenly. My room was pitch black. I checked my phone. 3 a.m. Too early. Too quiet. Then I heard something downstairs. A soft sound, like a footstep testing the floor. I held my breath. Nothing else. I convinced myself it was the house settling and fell back asleep. 20 minutes later, I woke again. This time I knew. Someone was in my room. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then I heard it. A slow, wet inhale, right beside my bed. I reached for my phone without turning on the light. And that's when I saw her. A face, right at the edge of my bed. Black hair hanging forward. Eyes wide, unblinking. The deranged woman from next door. When my phone screen lit her face, she screamed. A high-pitched animal scream. I screamed too. I ran. She followed. I tripped, scrambled, slammed my bedroom door shut, and bolted downstairs, locking the stairway door behind me. She pounded on it, screaming words I couldn't understand. I called the police with shaking hands. They arrived fast. They took her away. The older woman begged, pleaded. Then she looked at me. I've never seen hatred like that. I didn't press charges. It didn't matter. 5 minutes after the cops left, I saw the older woman get in her car and drive away. She came back before sunrise. They still live next door. Sometimes late at night, I see someone standing in their upstairs window.